Hi, how are we doing? Everyone all right? There we go. That's what we like to hear. Welcome, first of all. Thanks for coming to the Social Code. I'm not sure, has anyone been before to one of our events or not? Raise your hands. Any Oscar staff. Welcome to the Social Code. We try and make these events as inclusive as possible. For us, it's about kind of sharing knowledge, a chance to kind of network with kind of like-minded individuals. And that's really the concept around Social Code. We're running these events across the country, in the US as well. And we're proud of the ethos of bringing people together of all levels, whether you be a first-time developer, someone who's looking to get into tech, or you're a CEO, MD, CTO. It's across the whole spectrum. So I think that's something we're proud of. And I hope when you get a chance to chat with everyone later today, you'll kind of realize that it's about talking to people of all levels within the tech industry. So yeah, welcome for sure. A little bit about myself. My name is Jake. I am your host this evening. If you have any problems, don't come to me. Speak to Lauren. But other than that, I look after kind of product management, recruitment. My background, I come from an athletics background. And with that, I've spent a lot of time working with kind of top performing athletes and top performers within business. And I think one thing that stands out with all of them is that they really go out to find ways to improve themselves and kind of take ownership for their career development and their lives. And I think that's something that a lot of the people in this room are showing, that you come out to kind of improve yourselves, improve your knowledge, improve your careers, improve your knowledge base. But yeah, I think I'd like to thank obviously Oscar, who put on these events. A lot of hard work goes into bringing them together. And more importantly, I'd like to thank Razor, who are just across the road. Yeah, a little louder at the back, please. Yeah, thanks to Razor. They've sponsored tonight's event. They're an innovative tech agency based here. They've got offices here in Sheffield and in Leeds. And I think without them, bringing these events together wouldn't happen. So yeah, big round of applause for Razor. And I think with that, I'd like to introduce Martin, our first speaker. He's a principal consultant with Razor, 15 years in the tech industry on the front end. And I'd like to bring him up to present his talk, and which I think you guys will really enjoy. So yeah, big round of applause for Martin.
Just go used to the clicker. Hi, I'm Martin Alcock, and this is my talk on UX for immersive experiences. Just realised today that the title effectively says user experience for immersive experiences. Let's get going. So, who am I? I am principal product consultant at Razor. Like Jake says, I've been in tech for 15 years, around about. I've been at Razor for about 3.5 years, previously done stuff like design, UX, front-end development, and incidentally, Razor are sponsoring this. If you have a difficult tech problem that you'd like to solve, come talk to us. Or indeed, if you like solving difficult tech problems, maybe you want to join us. You'll find, I think everyone's at the back. So yeah, just find someone with some like Razor merch on them or something. Say hello. So yeah, I've worked on a few VR and AR projects previously. I've outside of work, just out of interest. One of those has won an award from Design Week. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I attempted a VR-based startup. Turns out doing startups is quite hard. Doubly so if you're trying to use an emerging technology. Hence why I'm here rather than on a beach sipping a pina colada. And I help run the Immersive Sheffield meetup, which will hopefully get going again one day before like Sheffield Digital beat me up or something. You can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. If you scan that, then you will get to my page on LinkedIn. So I'll get going with it. So what is immersive technology? Start off with the basics. we can imagine immersive technology on a line from immersive, completely immersive, all the way to not immersive at all. And along that line, we have a few different like paradigms of display of how you're going to do it. Going from 2D display, then into augmented reality, and then mixed reality, and then the other end, like immersive, completely immersive virtual reality. In terms of the devices that you might use to do that, you've got things like the Quest and HTC Vive, Valve Index. Mixed reality, you've got things like the Microsoft HoloLens. Then going down into augmented reality, you've got things like your phone, tablets, stuff like that. And then right at the end of the scale, when we're not immersive at all, we've got monitors. Sorry, monitors. For the kind of applications and things you might have used or experienced and stuff, you've got stuff like Snapchat. Like the filters on Snapchat, they are kind of immersive, but not really. Things like Pokemon Go, it will display a Pikachu in front of you, but it's not really, it's just kind of, it's superficial, it's putting it in front of you. Then you've got stuff like AR maps, which will show like the directions you need to take, and they are physically, the physical location matters. It's more mixed reality, but it's still on your phone. Mixed reality, this is a demo application that we developed at Razer using the HoloLens. So this will display, this is linked up to our coffee machine, and using an IoT device, it will basically monitor power throughput from the machine. And then when we detect a spike in it, we can tell you how many cups of coffee we've brewed in the machine. We're solving big problems at Razer. And then even within virtual reality, you have a bit of a spectrum. Like Beat Saber is super immersive. You are immersed in Beat Saber, but you're not going to be fooled. It's a real place. And then on the right end of the scale, you've got something like Half-Life Alyx, which is probably like the state of the art in terms of like an immersive experience. You can pick up and do stuff with everything. So how does it work? I'm not probably the best person to answer this for you, but I'm going to have a go. So for every frame of video it takes, it works out like individual markers in the scene. It automatically does that. And then like between each frame, it works out what will happen between the gyroscope and the accelerometer to work out how far you travel between those. It then rebuilds a stereoscopic view of the world and it uses like AI and ML to work out like that's a floor, that's a ceiling, that's a table. Like iPad Pro, it's got lasers on it. It's cool stuff. Like it does all of that. It does all of that. And that's just the hardware working out where you are in the world and what you're doing. On top of that, you then have the 3D component. For the 3D component, for every single pixel on the screen, you've got to work out what's on there. You've got to work out like what the depth of that is, what the material is. You've got to simulate lights. You've got to bounce that light off that material. It's going to bounce in a particular way because of the normal maps. And then there's like physics simulations on top, and you've got like lighting and all these different things. If you want to have like something semi-transparent, you've got to like do another pass and like render all that stuff again. And you've got to do all of that stuff 60 to 90 times per second. Like it's magic. Like, it's incredible that it works. And if you do that, like if for VR, you've got to do that twice as well. It's staggering like how fast it all has to go. So what about UX then? Like that's very, very bad like overview of the technology. So let's start with some fundamentals. Don't make your user sick. Like in VR particularly, where people are very susceptible to this, the camera is effectively your head. If you create an experience where the camera starts jerking around suddenly, people are going to throw up. Don't do it. It's absolutely fundamental to the whole thing. Even with the best will in the world, people will feel a bit nauseous doing it sometimes. Try not to cause injuries. There's not too much you can do about an errant child running into your play space and getting bothered. But what you can do is maybe like design interactions that aren't quite so violent, perhaps. Like don't make things where they'll punch through a light in the ceiling or punch through the monitor or something. And then personal bugbear of mine, don't make people read. Reading could cause eye strain, VR can cause eye strain. Let's not do both of them at the same time. I don't know why someone decided to make a VR reading app. I really don't. So designing UX, I'm into my scales. So if you find yourself unlucky enough to be listening to someone like a UX designer, you might hear them talk about things on a scale of explicit to implicit. Now, in typical UX, you might think of this as like the difference in a save dialogue. When you save something, it explicitly says, do you want to overwrite this? Modern things like clouds, you just expect it's implicitly saved every time you make a change to it. You could, in terms of immersive experiences, you might think of this in terms of clarity or immersion. Or to go further with that, maybe you can think about it in terms of, is it inside the world or outside the world? Now, that's a pretty, it's an interesting paradigm, it's an interesting concept. What would be great is if there was a word that summed all of that up into just like a nice concept. Fortunately, there is. It's diegesis. Diegesis is literally from narrative, like all the best words in the English language. It comes from the ancient Greeks. Thanks, guys. You might be thinking that it's a fancy word, like why I've not experienced that in my life. But I guarantee you, if you've ever watched a film or TV, you have experienced diegesis. I'll try and like give an example here. So, in a movie, a character will hear something. They hear like a gunshot, someone shouting in the next room or something. What they don't hear is the music go dun, dun, dun. So that is the difference between diegetic sound and non-diegetic sound. The diegetic sound is from narrative. It's something that the characters experience. It's something in the world. Non-diegetic sound is the thing that like gives the viewer context around it. So, there we go. Borrowing from movies. So the games industry and by extension, immersive technology have been borrowing from movies for quite some time. Here's an artist's representation of that borrowing process. It's what we have with games is we have these concepts of diegetic sound. It exists within games. You have your gunfire, but you have your non-diegetic sound in terms of like the soundtrack that goes along with it. So beyond that, we have something called diegetic UI. So diegetic UI is something that exists within the world, and it is within the narrative of the world as well. Opposite to that is non-diegetic UI. Like it's outside of the world, it's outside of the narrative. What you have with a bit of UI and UX, though, is something that fills up these other two spaces. Spatial UI that exists within the world, but is outside of the narrative. And meta UI that is inside of the narrative, but outside of the world. And if you hate 2x2 matrices, I'm sorry, I've just made you look at them. So all of this is sounding pretty abstract to you, maybe right now. So here's some examples. Yay. Biggest one for diegetic UI in games industry is Dead Space. It's an absolute masterclass in it. You have the health meter is on the back of your character, the status meter. Even when you're in the menu and in your inventory, you're still inside of the game. So if you hang around too long inside the inventory, you're going to get attacked by a monster. Like you're never outside of the game. It's all perfectly within the narrative. Firewatch, if you want to look at your map and your compass, you have to physically get the map and compass out and have a look at it. And then VR, we've got something like Tilt Brush, where your palette exists on your non-dominant hand. So it kind of replicates that feeling of going to a palette, picking your brush, and drawing with it. Non-diegetic UI, typically associate this with like older games, all the stuff around the outside, that's non-diegetic UI. Doom as well, it's non-diegetic. Spatial UI. So in this, the player tag, the name tags above the cars, that's spatial UI. A better example is in Splinter Cell Conviction. We've got this instruction to the player that's part of the world, but the characters aren't aware of it. And then meta UI, this is from Watch Dogs. So the character's looking at their phone, but you have this something come up next to you that is part of the narrative, but it's not part of the world. It's similarly like something like Modern Warfare, when you get shot, your face gets covered in blood. It's not part of the world, but it's part of the narrative. So what's all that got to do with anything, particularly around immersive experiences, I suppose? So VR, MR, you've got 3D space only. There is no concept of a 2D plane in front of your face. So everything has to be diegetic. It's best if it's part of the world. It's best if it's part of the experience. You've got spatial UI to instruct the players around it. Could you do meta UI in 3D space? Kind of, but if you had an experience where you were looking at a phone in VR, then why not just have a look at the phone in VR? In AR, you have access to everything. So you've got 3D and 2D space. The 2D screen in front of you that you get in diegetic, non-diegetic UI is literally your phone screen. But just because you've got all of the options available to you, use them wisely. If you have an experience on an AR app where you hover your phone over an object and it will display some text around it, why not make it so that text is just displayed to you rather than having to hold your phone above the object and keep it still while you read it? So when you're trying to make your UX choices around what you're going to do with your immersive experience, you've got a few things to consider. First is use case. Like, are you doing this for work? Or is it for fun? Are you trying to make a simulation? You've got your art style as well. So are you going for realism or are you going for something that's stylized? You've also got your audience to consider. Like, is this for adults? Is it for kids? Is it for workers? Like, if it's for adults, you might encourage a bit more sort of exploration and like have a go with it. For kids, you might need to be more explicit. For workers, they're just trying to get a job done. So just tell them what to do. You've also got the big one, budget. Do you have a giant budget, or like, is it more likely that you've got a teeny tiny one? So we're back to this line again between clarity and immersion. So on one end of the scale, you've got something like Half-Life Alyx, which famously at the beginning of the game, you're able to pick up a marker and you can draw on the glass and you can sit there and draw all day if you like. Half-Life Alyx had a budget somewhere between 30 and 75 million. So if you've got a budget like that, go for it. Treat yourself. The other end of the scale, you've got something where you can really like telegraph to your users what you're trying to do. So in this, which is from Assassin's Creed, it's obvious who you're targeting here. You can do something that's a bit in the middle. So this is from Horizon Zero Dawn. And the way that they telegraph that you can climb on specific surfaces is they make some elements of it like highlighted. They highlight the surfaces in yellow that you can actually target to climb up. You can't see them, they're there, there, and there. So let's try and work a problem. So this is an application I made for Sheffield Children's Hospital, worked with a company in Sheffield called Megaverse. And it's distraction therapy for children in the treatment rooms. So the idea is that they're getting a bandage changed or injection or something like that. It distracts them from what's actually happening and they enjoy the experience more. So we had this problem. So the idea of this game, so I'll go back. The idea of this game is that you have a bucket of fish in front of you and you feed the fish to these penguins that are floating around on some icebergs. The penguins, they get full and they swim off and the game continues. So we had this bucket. We needed to telegraph to the children that they are going to be able to like interact with the bucket. And the brief we were given for this was the target audience was children between 3 and 16, which was quite a big gap. So we had to consider, like, we can't tell the kids, like, we can't just say, like, some fish out of the bucket because maybe some of them can't read. So what we did was we lent on the art style. It's cartoony, so we didn't need to make it all realistic. So what we did was animate it. So the bucket shakes in front of them. And then we added some extra UI on top of it. to show like, oh, you can flick from the bucket and throw the fish to the penguins. So we've got diegetic UI in the shape of the bucket shaking, and then we've got spatial UI over the top. That's in 3D space, and it's telling people that they can do it. Other end of the scale is this promo shot from a HoloLens application. So this is very, very direct, and it's prioritizing clarity heavily over the top of like immersion. It's telling the user that they should get the torque engine, they should put it at that location, and they should turn it this number of times. It's being incredibly like clear over it, but that's the use of the application. That's what they're trying to achieve. So, Martin's top tips. Content is king. Whatever you're doing, you should always consider like, what's the priority of your experience? If you're making a game, maybe you should prioritize like immersion and play, like let people explore in it, let people enjoy it. If you're doing something for work, maybe you should go for clarity and like let people just tell people what they need to do. If you do have to use text, like it needs to be a lot bigger than you might be used to. This is cribbed straight from the Microsoft HoloLens documentation. If it's at like reading size over here, it's like 14 to 18 points compared to like what you might usually do is like 12 to 16 for a web page, something like that. Be kind to your users. Don't make your users throw up. Like this is evergreen advice for any like developers or designers. Don't make your users throw up. Smooth tracking jitter. So a lot of stuff, it's getting better these days, but you might have tracking jitter from your experiences, like the cameras and sensors try to keep up with what you're doing. Try and like smooth out animations so it's not like wobbling around in front of your user. Try and make your experiences self-correct, like have a bit of loose logic. It's something we found in the children's hospital thing, where if you try to make it all work like a clockwork universe, you can't guarantee that your users are going to work within that clockwork realm. So have the experience self-correct as much as it's possible. It stops breaking the immersion. Think about your input. Don't use it. If you can avoid using a keyboard, like typing in VR is laborious, it's hard work. Is there some other way that you can do this? And then we've got this, trying to find a balance between skeuomorphism, immersive, and clarity. So you could have a lever that looks just like a lever, and then you're just relying on that user to look at it and go, oh, well, I guess I can pull that. But you might say like, oh, well, I can make that like brighter than the surroundings. So people look at it and go, oh, well, that's clearly something I can interact with. You've got to find that balance between making it immersive and like making it really clear to the user. This is a big one, embracing the medium, like use interactions that you have access to. Like if you imagine that someone's like looking at a slideshow in VR, like don't make them just press a button to go to the next one. Maybe they can change the slide with a flick of the wrist or something like that. Like let them use the body. Try and get them to explore the space, move around. You've got this incredible like ability to get people to like move around space and understand it in 3 dimensions. Use spatial reasoning. Like the great thing about VR particularly is that you're able to like hack into people's spatial reasoning. Like people have been, like since you were born, you are like creating this spatial reasoning model in your head, like exploit it. Can you represent data in like an engaging way using space rather than just it's a bar graph or something? And then play with like impossible spaces. Like what if you could pick up a box and put it on your head and there's an entire room in there? What if you can hold a whole solar system in the palm of your hand? Like really like explore the space and exploit it. So that's it. Like, has anyone got any questions? Yes. Do you think there'll be any positive mental health impact from VR? Yeah, so I've seen some research in particularly like it's used a lot in old people's homes, stuff like that, trying to get them into like immersive experiences to relive their youth a little bit. I've seen some stuff with like dementia patients to like get them into that. One thing that I've spoken to an architect a few years ago now. There's actually people with dementia tend to experience like tunnel vision, and like the colours that they can see change over like the experience of the disease. So while it might not be necessarily for the people that have dementia, you could use like VR for architects to better understand the experiences of someone with dementia, and then they can basically put themselves in their shoes and experience it like that. Beyond mental health, there's been a lot of stuff actually in Sheffield, in like physical health. There's a guy called Ivan Phelan, who is based out of Sheffield Hallam, has been doing some stuff with Children's Hospital as well, doing some like physical therapy stuff with kids. So like burns fixing, like kids tend to get a lot of burns because they pull things onto themselves. So he's developed a couple of applications. There's one where it's a climbing game. They've got to like climb up the tower, and it like forces them to like move their arms around and stretch the skin. There's another one where it's like an archery game. And the great thing about that is it's parametric. So as they like shoot the arrow, they've got to reach back into the quiver to get another arrow. And like, if they've got a burn, they will try and do it as like subtly as they possibly can. So they can just move the quiver further back down their back until they like really have to reach for it. So there's loads of applications in terms of like healthcare and stuff.
Where does the UI fit around VR effectively applies, right? So where's the eyes where it should be? You've got things like Guardian and Quest, so if I step outside of that line, it allows me to see. Are the UI elements that start to blur the lines between the immersed world versus the real world to solve the problems of punching a child, punching a can, punching a TV? I'm not seeing many experiments that merge those two worlds. What's immersive for what we've got, that I am immersed.
Yeah, so the Guardian stuff in the Quest is an example of spatial UI, and it's an example of mixed reality. It's using like pass-through cameras to be able to see like what's around you. In terms of like mixed reality, you've got a lot of stuff in a lot of mixed reality tends to be in like the workspace. You've got a lot of things where like applications where you like might be repairing something and you can have something that exists over the top of it to like, so this is like what you do next. Unfortunately, if the child wants to be punched, there's not much you can do. Yeah, like hopefully like people will set up their like Guardian space to like have a bit of like clearance around it so they don't get to the edge and then punch out of it or something. But yeah, it's unfortunately a problem that relies on users being sensible. It's doomed. Yeah.
One before, but do you think the last version was the immersive meeting in workplaces? Is that a goer? Is that our future, or do you think that's a fun sideshow?
I've had a go at doing meetups in VR, and it's hard work. It really is. It's like all the worst elements of being in person and all the worst elements of being on a computer all at the same time. It's exhausting. That's not to say I don't think you can do like good work in VR. Like you've got like that infinite play space, so you can brainstorm infinitely. You can like pick up an area and create something of like incredible depth over in a corner or something. There's a lot of work that is being done to do like VR for architects again. So this is, obviously you've got like a 3D space that you want to show to your clients or something that you can work together with another architect to go, oh, well, what if there was a wall here or something like that? I think work for VR is probably best with like a specific goal in mind rather than just meeting up for a chat myself. That's my opinion anyway.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Oh, we got one here as well, yeah. So accessibility of the
accessibility like for like Right. Yeah, so obviously VR is not going to be particularly exciting if you're blind. It's going to like be difficult for one eye and stuff. I imagine, I've not actually thought about it before, but I imagine it would be very similar to what they'd experience normally. Like they would suffer like the loss of depth perception because it's not going into both eyes. It's a limitation of it, to be honest. It's very much based around visuals. What it can do is allow people to maybe re-experience stuff that they lost. Like if you are in a wheelchair or something, maybe you can have something where you're able to experience walking again. But it's not like I don't think they've really like thought too much about it, but it's a great question. So yeah, I will wrap up. Remember, content is king. Make text bigger, be kind, don't make people sick, embrace the medium. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. Final thing about Razor is, yeah, we are literally over the road. If you want to speak to us, there's so many of us. Just come and just talk to someone. And we have just launched a podcast as well. You can find that on all your favorite podcast services. It's called Tech Will Save Us. I think we'll be doing the next one as well. So that's it. That's me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right. Extra round of applause to Martin as well. Great job. We're going to take a quick break now. Grab yourselves a drink. We're going to put the pizzas out. That's going to take a couple of minutes. But yeah, grab yourselves a slice of pizza, grab a drink. We're going to be back shortly to listen to Neve. But yeah, let's get on with a bit of food and a few drinks. Can't go wrong with a bit of pizza, really, if you ask me. Didn't have my favourite one, though. I like the one with the jalapenos on it, but no complaints. I'm going to introduce Neve Jones. She's a growth product manager from Pendo. She has a real passion for building SaaS products, so I've been told. But yeah, without further ado, big round of applause for Neve.
Okay, I'm going to figure out how to do two things at the same time. I've got it. Okay. Cool. Right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. I'm trying to remember that I'm here to give a talk about shared outcomes that empower product teams and not at karaoke. I would like to tell you that it was more than a week ago that I was doing karaoke, but it wasn't. So we're here for shared outcomes that empower product teams. As a side note, I was once told, like, if you're ever doing public speaking, don't start with a joke because it won't land, people won't laugh, and then you'll be thrown off for the rest of your talk. But I did it anyway. It never works. Okay, so I was going to say thank you to SocialCode, to Oscar, to Razor for putting this event on. And thank you for Sydney and Matilda as well. This is an awesome venue. So yeah, as Jake said, I'm Neve Jones and I am a growth product manager and I work at a company called Pendo. I've worked as a product manager and in the product space for about 7 years, predominantly in B2B, software as a service, and working with really products that help customers better understand their customers. So it's how they make those connections with end consumers through things like feedback and research as well. I do lots of things in the product space. I co-organize a meetup in Birmingham called Product Tank. There's actually 200 of those across the world. There isn't one in Sheffield yet, but there is one in Manchester if you're ever up for taking a train across. That is a great meetup. I clicked too soon. In terms of growth product management, what does it mean? What does it look like? So growth product management is all about managing the product experience as customers come and experience your product for the first time. So they hear about the products, they're coming onto the website, they are signing up for the first time, they're experiencing moments of delight, and then hopefully moving through to being a paid customer and then growing with your product. turn into revenue, and then retention and referral as well. So that's a little bit about what I do. A bit about Pendo. So Pendo is on a mission to elevate the world's experiences with software, and it powers every step through the product discovery and delivery lifecycle. It does it through 3 core areas. First, analytics. So what are your customers doing when in the product? How are they using your product? Next, based on how your customers are using the product, being able to guide them with in-app messaging and move them towards those moments of delight. And the last piece is marrying the qualitative with the quantitative and understanding from customers, okay, how was that experience and how can we improve the software as well? So really giving you that 360 view. So the agenda for this evening, we're going to jump into the product team dilemma. Then we're going to talk about outcomes over outputs, and then what outcomes look like in practice. So when we talk about product management, we often talk about that intersection between business, technology, and human values. So we think about what's valuable to our customers, what's feasible to build, what's usable, and what's desirable. But when I think about product management, I think about product being a team sport. It's not just a product manager doing things and having these outcomes. We're all working together as a cohesive team. And what is this team doing? What are all of those aspects of the job? So they're doing things like understanding truly the customer, their goals, their motivations, understanding the problems they have with getting towards those. We're designing, we're building, we're testing, we're ensuring quality, we're working with product operations, product marketing, we're going to market, we're measuring success, we're capturing feedback. Then we go into how we price, how we package, is our product secure, scalable, robust, and on from there. And we're doing this multitude of different things across many different facets. We're product people, we're engineering, we're designers, we're quality engineers, quality assurance, product marketing, and beyond. And with all these different tasks that need to be done in order to build great products, we can often build in silos with, okay, well, I'm owning this part of the process and I'm responsible for this. And those silos can sometimes manifest in many different ways. They can build us into more of a feature factory, and we're thinking about just the thing that's been landed on my plate. It can land us feeling more in a waterfall instead of agile, where we're going, okay, I think this is the problem and we should solve it like this. I'm going to give it to design going to go and design it, and then I'm going to give it to engineering. But really what I wanted to talk about today is how we can get past that, and how having aligned outcomes instead of focusing on the outputs allows us to break down those silos and build products that people love. Okay. That felt like the longest drink I've ever taken. Okay, so what is it that we mean by outcomes? There's a definition on screen. So outcomes bring together 2 key areas. We think about a change in customer behavior that not only is impacting the customer, but is ultimately driving business results. And that's what I really like about outcomes, is it's breaking those 2 things down and it's tying them together. How do you bridge the gap between, I'm putting this thing into my system and this thing is changing, people are adopting this new feature. Okay, great. Well, what is the business result that that's driving? And not overlooking like the importance of outputs, like the things that we're building, the enhancements to our software. These are the things that help us get to the outcome. But if we focus purely on just the delivery of the output, we lose sight of what's the impact of that's having on our end customer and ultimately on our business direction. So here we go. So with this, how do we determine our outcomes? And outcomes tend to be framed from a company level, from that overarching sort of strategy of where the business is heading. There's many different frameworks for how you can break down that product vision, product strategy. I pulled Roman Picklers is one that I tend to use. I like the overarching frame here, which is essentially, what's our vision? What's our purpose on this planet? What's the impact we're going to have? The strategy, how are we going to realize this? Then our product roadmap. Okay, what are the product goals? What are the outcomes that we're looking to drive that then lend us to our company overarching goals? And then we go down into our product backlog, like, okay, what are the things that we are going to do that are going to enable us to get to those product outcomes? But also when I think about outcomes and sort of the reason why I think it's important for aligning teams, it's not just about what's the company trying to achieve. I think about the like intrinsic motivation of like why we wake up in the morning and why we do things. And this is taken from Daniel Pink's book, who talks about like, if you were to take away like your basic needs, like I need water, I need food, I need to feel safe. And if you take away motivation being like monetary rewards or like I'm going to be punished, like what is it that actually motivates you? And Daniel Pink outlines 3 areas: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And what I like about having shared outcomes across product teams is actually like giving someone a purpose as to why they're building this thing, why are they designing this thing, why am I testing this, why have you asked me to build it in such a way? If we're all aligned around where we're heading as a team and where the company's heading and what's required of us, it means that we feel the need for it and we're motivated to do the work. And then the other side is if we know the context, we understand the business context, we can then be autonomous with our decision making. And we're not always going to make the right decisions, but we have the context of what the decision is we need to make and the impact it's going to have. We're ultimately going to head in the right direction as well. And the last sort of framework I wanted to bring in here and share is around, so this is from Teresa Torres' Continuous Discovery, but it talks about how when we're building products, we start with what's the desired outcome. So what's that change in behavior that we want to have on our customers, which has a direct impact on our business? And then we bubble that down into, okay, if that's the outcome we're looking to drive, what are those opportunities? And then from there, okay, how might we solve for that? And what are the different ways we may solve for that? How do we reduce the risk of failure through exploring those different experiments and those different opportunities? And with this, what I really like about it is it asks you to like call out, like, what are the assumptions that we're making as part of this solution? And are we okay with that risk? And the reason why I bring those 3 together is thinking about the advantage of bringing cross-functional teams together to do these types of exercises. So instead of product people sat going, okay, well, we could solve it like this or solve it like this. Let's pick the third one and run with that. We can bring engineering in, we can bring design in, we can bring development operations in, and we can understand like what are the constraints, or on the other side, like what are the opportunities that we're not thinking about that actually are going to help us build those better products. Spilt that one. Okay, so what does it look like in practice? How do we bring that all together? So I wanted to just share, I guess, essentially just a couple of practical tips that like I've tried to implement through my own product work that I found useful from like reading lots and lots of books and theory around like empowering teams and stuff. And the first ultimately is around how we give teams purpose. So it's great for me to stand up here and be like, oh, outcomes are great and everyone should go and do outcomes. And isn't this like a great world that we live in where everyone feels super motivated in their work? And it's like, it's really hard to do. And I'm not saying that in any way I've mastered this, but something that I found has a huge impact is having like executive or leadership buy-in to outcomes. Because often we might sit in a room with whoever from leadership and they'll say, okay, how are we delivering against this? How are we tracking against this? Are we in the green for this? And those are answers, those are questions that like we have to answer as product team. We can't just be like, oh, but we're measuring this and we're doing this. Like, but how do we bring them along on that journey? So something that I've done in the past, like with trying to bring and gain that sort of executive buy-in on this, is like, yes, we'll do an outline of when the delivery is going to be. We'll highlight if we're in the green, if we're in the red, whatever. But we'll also outline, okay, here are the milestones along the way. Here's what we're going to be learning along the way. And here's how we're going to bring customers along on this journey of delivery. So at every stage, we're going, yeah, we've delivered this thing. Oh, it was about 2 weeks over, but it's there. But here are all the things that we've measured and learned along the way. And then it just starts becoming like part of that rhetoric of like, yeah, that thing is there and delivered, but we're also talking about the things that we're learning and sharing. And bringing into that as well, like just any sort of like customer quotes or qualitative feedback or something that brings it to life a little more. And then the other side of that is how we link what we're asking the teams to do to those overarching goals. So how we bridge the gap between, okay, our company goal is around revenue, it's around retention, it's around some sort of expansion goal. Like, how do we bubble that down into actually like, this is our team and our team is working on this very specific part of the product, and it feels like a really big stretch between the two. So how do we like layer that up into, okay, well, why are we doing this? What's that going to have? And how do we then have ownership over it? And with that, it's all about bringing it into the day-to-day. So one area that we do, so at Pendo, we do like quarterly planning cycles. I imagine a lot of you do quarterly, maybe half yearly, maybe monthly if you're sort of a much smaller organization. And with this, we have like a company kickoff, but then what we'll do is then like a team kickoff with each of our own like engineering design teams that we work with. And we talk about, okay, well, where have we been? Like as a team, what did we do in the last quarter? What were the outcomes that we set out to achieve? How did we trail against that? What did we learn along the way? And then for the next quarter, where are we headed? What's the context from last quarter that we're carrying through? Are there any changes in direction? Are we pivoting on anything? And then ultimately, and most importantly, like how does that thing that we're doing bubble up to our overarching goal of what we're doing next? Something we do have, and like the team that I work with at Pendo, we have like 4 sort of core outcomes that are measured in goals that we work towards. And like, we all know what they are. We all know what the benchmarks are. We all know what we're working towards. So we have like those bigger rocks of initiatives to work towards, but also the team know, okay, if like, why are we not hitting X number? They know that they can go and look into and dig into those numbers, and they're like empowered to do so, to explore those problems without sort of waiting for, here's the next thing that we're working on. And bringing outcomes into initiative kickoffs as well. So for like my own like specification docs, I use Shape Up, which is a great book if you've not read it, from Basecamp. It talks about shaping work into like 6-week cycles. Why I bring it in is they do like a really good breakdown that I use just to essentially frame up like background and the problem. The appetite, I use this in terms of like, what's the customer appetite for this? But then what I do is then bring the engineer in, bring design in at that phase. So instead of going like, okay, and then here's the rest of the document and then go and build the thing, it's like, actually, are we aligned around why we're even doing this thing? What the problem is, what the opportunity poses to customers and to the business, and then come in to what does the solution space look like? Now, sometimes this like won't be for everything. Sometimes we'll have a pretty good idea based on what we know already of what a solution should feel like, and we're more finessing. Sometimes we'll bring in like, oh, this is different ways it's been solved. But if it's like a totally new challenge, we'll go, okay, and what are the different ways that we might solve this? And this is where we can bring in that Teresa Torres framework of those opportunities and solutions. Some other areas on there that are good, like I'll always bring in like a decision log so the team can see, oh, we didn't do this, but we did do that. But But I guess ultimately, my overarching summary of this is like, I don't like to produce like product requirement documents that then someone just goes and builds. It's like, how do you frame something up as like a breathing document that lots of people can collaborate on too? This one's a little blurry, but it is thinking about, okay, now we've got that solution space in there. We know what we're going to build. How do we think about how we're going to deliver that to our customers? Again, in a more cohesive way. So with engineering, we know the feasibility. With our designers there too, we know like what's core, what has to be there for this user experience and journey to make sense. So how can we bridge this into releases that allow us to then get like iterations out to customers and reduce the risk of like working on something for 6 months before it's in someone's hands? And so a big part of how we then align around those outcomes is we're building dashboards and we're sharing feedback. So for everything that we're outlining there with our like initiatives, we're going, right, okay, how does this connect to our outcomes? How are we going to measure this in terms of our metrics? Often the connection that's made between the two is like used by leading and lagging indicators. So like our leading indicators may be like, okay, if we see adoption of this funnel that looks like X, then we have a lagging indicator, which is a retention metric that then links more to an overarching goal. So we can see if we're in the green, if we're in the red, if we need to pivot more. What I love about doing this, and it's had like more of a impact than I realized, was like sharing it not only like upwards, but across the team. Like some of the engineers I work with can come in and be like, oh, Neve, did you see that feedback that we've got? Like, are we going to go and fix that? And they're able to really get a feel for what are the problems there that our customers are experiencing as they're moving through our software. And that really helps us to like spin up the flywheel of building and measuring and learning. And the reason why I wanted to bring this in is like, we talk about this often, especially in the world of like product-led growth, is like, okay, we build and we measure and we learn and we keep doing that. But it's so important for this to be framed up by the outcome that we're driving. Like we can spin our wheels, we can do that really well, but how do we actually move them in a way that's going to drive us towards our outcomes? So the key takeaways are things that I remember writing. So the first one is start small. So as I said, you know, it can be through lots of different organizations, through lots of different stages of product maturity. It can be difficult to make this connection between what you're doing in your day-to-day and what's that overarching company goal that we're aiming towards. But how do we start small with how we can bridge the connection of the impact of the work that we're doing? Again, gaining that executive buy-in and working in a way that could run the two things parallel to each other to then start moving towards being measured by outcomes. Bringing in the business and customer context into meetings with engineering, with design, so that we're thinking about our purpose in that day-to-day. And like some of the best times where I've seen this like come into fruition is like sharing like short customer clips from like discovery calls I've had. And then like 3 weeks later, someone quoting it back to me in a meeting. But yeah, last one is like sharing the good and the bad. Like it's great when all the numbers are green and everything is fantastic, but that's not like the reality of the world we live in. And actually by sharing the bad, we're learning a lot more there. And we're knowing what it is that we need to do to get us into the green as well. And lastly, just a re-emphasis on product being a team sport, and it takes a village to build great products. Thank you. That is me.
We're just going to do a few questions for Neve. Does anyone have a question? I'm sure there's one or two. So the question was, what is your favorite tool to enable the whole process? That's not a tool.
So before I worked at Pendo, I used to say Pendo a lot of the time for enabling this. So I guess, oh my gosh, what am I going to pick? What's my second favorite tool? I'm going to choose Miro or Dovetail as my second favorite. So what we do, like we spend a lot of time in like Miro as like a scratch pad, like bringing a lot of these like insights together, and it just being super collaborative. We spend a lot of time in there, like mapping out user journeys, bringing in those customer stories, and relating those all together. And then the other tool we use for like more of the like qualitative research side that sits alongside the shorter form qualitative is all within Dovetail. So we bring that together there too. I think I'm like, what else would I say?
Anybody else? Oh, we've got a few more here. Yeah. Should we go? Yeah, we'll go to the front here first.
Based on what you just analyzed, it seems focus is more or less on software development. So what of again in the streets or process industry? So is it also applicable in this industry?
With which industry, sorry?
The streets, I mean the street manufacturing or process manufacturing.
So I have less experience in those spaces. So I will answer as someone that is, I guess, only predominantly worked within the software space. But I think ultimately with like anything that we're doing, anything that we're building, we're thinking about like, why is someone choosing to use our service, to use our product, or to like employ what we're doing? What's the job that that's looking to solve? And ultimately, how are we going to know if we're successful in doing that and we're successful in achieving that? And then through that lens, able to then outline, right, okay, well, what does our day-to-day look like? What does our week-to-week look like? And how do we know if we're in the green, and those like customers to us in whichever context that might be are like having good experiences and want to come back and do more and ultimately grow the business as well. So I guess that's where it's like in its broadest sense, like using outcomes. And I think it's probably boiling down to just essentially like what's the company strategy and how does what I relate to day to day feed into that company strategy.
We just got, yeah, one more question as well. Just...
Yeah, I think it is much harder as the company grows, because then what you're working on becomes really specific and it in itself becomes its own silo, and you start to lose sight of like the system that it's part of itself, because you're going like, right, this thing I have to do is like optimize this part of the step, but like you're not like your reach doesn't expand of like the bit in front of it and the bit behind it. You're like, you need to do this bit in the middle. So then how do you like try to extract away from that? Like, okay, but if this whole area could do this thing with this focused on this outcome and goal, then we would be able to like significantly reduce whatever it could be. So like having like gone from like a really small company into more of a like scale up side, it definitely becomes like there's much more going on, there's way more moving parts, and it becomes harder to have a overall impact as a singular team in it. It then becomes like, okay, the pillar is this, or like this whole function does this thing, as opposed to like you're like a product person and 4 engineers sat together, like literally making sure that we all have jobs the next day. Like it definitely changes in context and certainly becomes a lot harder. And just from like customer conversations and stuff, even going beyond that into more enterprise side, it's like, okay, but how do we get people to like think about like more than just that small bit, when also we really need to just think about that small bit as well. So
I think we just got one more question as well.
Okay, so you spoke about outcomes and outputs, right?
Yeah.
So you have situations where both of them are intertwined. So, and also if you have situations like that, where does your definition of output stop, and where does your definition of outcomes start?
Yeah, totally. So, like me and Rebecca were actually talking about this earlier today, was like, sometimes you just need to do stuff, right? Sometimes it just has to be an output. Sometimes you have to migrate to a new framework. You have to do something that's like the answer is, did we do it or didn't we do it? Like, have we successfully moved to that? There's always going to be an element of that. And like, not like everything that we're working on is going to fall completely into like, oh, it had this overarching outcome. But it's then recognizing like, what are the times where it is more binary, it is yes or no, we have delivered this or we haven't, and it's more output, versus actually how do we form more of a, but really like what we should be working on helps us to drive and run towards those company goals as well. So that's where like, I think there's always the nature of it intertwined, but where you can call that out and think like, okay, but by doing this, this enables these next things that we need to do as well.
Can we have a big round of applause from the parents? We're going to take a very short 10-minute break. If you want to make a stop at the bar, you want to use the bathroom, you want to finish off the last of the pizza, we're going to have a quick 10-minute break, and then we're going to be back with Shane for our final speaker. So yeah. All right. I'd like to welcome Shane to the stage. He is a software development manager for Autodesk, and he is going to be talking about authoritative leadership. So without further ado, a big round of applause for Shane.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, clicker. Okay, this is the best slide. I'm really pleased with this title, and it's downhill from here, really. So authoritative leadership, I'm going to try and say that as little as possible because it's a bit of a handful after a couple of years. And a gentle parents guide. So why this talk? So I've worked at a few, I'll come over this side. I've worked at a few software companies over the years. No, that's a bad idea. Feedback. And that I've gone from kind of Scrum Master, team lead, tech lead, product owner, product manager, development manager, sometimes at the same company at the same time. And when you get down to these companies, Amatec and Autodesk, you've got like 10,000 people. They start to invest a lot in training for leadership and management. And these aren't kind of small one person's ideas. These are fact-based trainings that are based on a lot of experience. And I started to see a lot of correlation between that and these guys. So when you're a first-time parent, you spend a lot of time at 3 in the morning reading parenting books, mostly focused on the chapter of how do I get this child to sleep? And I'm not joking. You told me not to start with a joke. There is a lot to get that ties these two together. So how do you raise children effectively, and how do you lead teams effectively? There's a psychological basis for both of them that are very, very similar. I started to see this correlation between gentle parenting and what I was being told as a leader in those programs. And this all sounds like super hipster woke kind of stuff. Gentle, it's like, are you really parenting? But it's not. So gentle parenting is applying empathy, understanding, respect, and boundaries to how you discipline your children. And I want to kind of break that down a little bit more because there's a lot of misunderstanding about this and miscommunication. And it's really about these words here. So empathy, understanding, respect, boundaries, and discipline. First, empathy. You're talking to a 4 or 5-year-old. What's causing them to behave this way? Why are they so cross, overwhelmed, tired? You know, they don't understand their emotions because they're too young to understand them. So you're trying to empathize with them, understand where they're coming from, and understand their perspective in life. That's where understanding comes in. Are these emotions, are they frightening for them? Do they understand where these are coming from? Are they capable of controlling this? And what's actually important to you? Remember, these are 4-year-olds, like I've said. My son's 5 now, he keeps telling me. And what's really important to him is not, I think it's a bit daft, like he's very concerned whether he gets the red cup or the blue cup. And if I give him the blue cup and he asks for the red cup, but he meant the blue cup, then all hell breaks loose. But these things are really, really important to kids. They're not important to us, but you have to understand that they are really important for them. So seeing that from their perspective. Respect, this is very different from when I was growing up. It was, you know, I'm your parent, do what I've told you to do, or you get the spoon. But now it's kind of, you're starting to think about these things in a different way as modern parents. And I should say that I'm not saying that every parent should do this. I'm not advocating this as a parenting style. This is just the way that we've decided to raise our children. Me and my wife, not Autodesk, we don't advocate parenting advice. So kind of thinking about the child and have I acknowledged their needs and desires? Have I given them enough control? Because it's all about control. They want control. They want to be able to have something that they can, what's the word? Take ownership of. But you have to have boundaries. So I started off with never broken, but rarely is probably more accurate when you're tired or you're on a holiday. Do you really want to make it 6 o'clock at bedtime when you're in Spain and the sun's out and it's really nice? So rarely. But as long as those rules are understood and you don't break them too often, then it kind of works. But the boundaries need to be logical, easy to explain, need to make sense. So you need to go to bed now because you're going to be tired in the morning. Start walking because you're going to get run over by a car. That kind of thing, you know, it's kind of, if the more logical it is, the better. In terms of discipline, old school, I said spoon, naughty steps, the kind of modern version of that. Gentle parenting talks a bit more about looking for the teaching moment in this. So thinking about coming from, you know, a pupil perspective, how can you teach your child to behave better? What can they take away to learn from that? Like I said, gentle parenting's had a bit of a bad rap because of the name. So they've kind of started to focus more on authoritative. I looked up the dictionary definition of authoritative, showing that you're confident, in control, expect to be respected and obeyed. So what does that mean for parenting? Confident, in control, expect to be respected and obeyed by applying empathy, understanding, respect, and boundaries to how you discipline your children. So that's gentle parenting in a nutshell. Yeah, I forgot about a slide actually. So as a summary of that, it's built on mutual trust and respect, works on the basis that children want to behave well, really demanding way to parent a child. You have to really think about what you're going to say to them, how you respond, how you react. You can't just tell them to get on with it. But it is proven to result in emotionally intelligent adults, and that is scientifically proven. There's a lot of research to back this up. So what does that make authoritative leadership? This is my kind of twisting of that. You are showing that you're confident, in control, expect to be respected and followed by applying empathy, understanding, respect, and boundaries to how you lead your team. So it's very important to look at the wording of this. We're not talking about permissive and we're not talking about authoritarian. So authoritarian would be just demanding that, but you're expecting it by applying all these things below. Neve touched on this a little bit with her 1.0 motivation 2 and 3. And 1 and 2 is kind of this bottom. So if you've never seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is a pyramid that the lower levels must be fulfilled in each stage for you to get to the top. So if you have physiological needs, like somewhere safe to sleep, food, water, you know, safety, physical safety, you can't think about anything above that. You're never going to reach those upper levels because you're too busy thinking about where you're going to sleep tonight, whether you're going to be attacked. As parents, it's basic, you know, you're kind of going to look after these lower levels. As leaders, managers, you hope that your company's taking care of your people enough that you don't need to be concerned about this. This isn't really your ballpark. Where we're focused as leaders is belonging and esteem in the psychological area. And that gets these people, your team members, to self-actualization, self-fulfillment. So you're getting the most out of your team. So how does this apply to leadership? Empathy. Start from the position everyone wants to do their best. So we're talking about children. They want to be the best for you. Everybody in your team does want to actually achieve. If they're not, maybe they're in the wrong role, maybe they're in the wrong company. But trying to move the conversation away from why are you not performing to How can I help you perform? What's going on in your life? What do I need to do to guide you through this? Understanding. So are they new to the company? Have they been here a while? Are they new to this position? Are they experienced? Do they have transferable skills from previous role? And what I'm getting at here is situational leadership. I have not done a slide on this because it's a patented, registered, trademark training course, and I don't want to get sued. But situational leadership puts team members into 4 boxes. And if you think about it in terms of your career progression, you start off, you leave university, and you're the bee's knees, and you're highly motivated, and you don't know anything. And you kind of get to a certain point, and you kind of go, oh no, I know I don't know anything, so now I'm really demotivated because I realized I don't know anything. You start to learn a bit more, you kind of move along that path a bit more, and eventually you end up in this expert role. And those 4 boxes are how you lead those people individually. So whether you're supporting them because they're already an expert and you don't really need to do anything, they're highly motivated, so you're just providing support. You're coaching them, so you're giving direct guidance. And the rest of it, directing them. And there is another one, but I don't want to get sued, I'll just say. But it's that kind of different angles on things. And you can look this up, and I'm sure there's somebody's posted those slides online. Respect, so operating on a mutual respect basis. So used to be that shouting, bullying bosses got the best out of their team. Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows us that that's not the case. You want people to feel belonging and part of the team. And this is often called servant leadership, and I don't really like that because it kind of suggests that as a servant, you're below your team, but you're actually with your team and surrounded by your team. You've just got one kind of arm out into the rest of the organization as a leader. So it's kind of more being part of that team, mutual respect, and having those boundaries. And this does still need to exist as adults. We still need these. And when you think about it, you do have boundaries. You get dressed when you go into work. Maybe explicitly you want to tell people to wear trousers on Zoom calls. So some are kind of implied in the modern world after COVID. Some need to be a bit more explicit. What's your process around PRs? What's your design thinking? How do you work as an organization? What's your company culture? What's your team organization culture? All of these things are boundaries so that people know where they are. And a lot of the problems you find in teams are when you have a new team leader comes in or a new scrum master who has a different idea of what those boundaries are, and upsets the rest of the team because nobody knows where they stand anymore. Important to note that this can be set by the team. So it's not about you setting these boundaries. A lot of the time the team will set them, and they'll set them implicitly as well. So what is authoritative leadership? Very similar to parenting, built on mutual trust and respect, works on the basis that everyone wants to achieve their best, is a more demanding and intentional way to lead a team, but it does result in self-fulfilled teams. And in summary, people of all sizes have the same essential needs. If you want to learn and grow as leaders or parents, you can practice empathy and understanding. You can show respect, set boundaries, will deliver great results, but it is hard. Remember, as a leader and as a parent, be kind to yourself.
Has anyone got some leadership questions? Sure, we've got one here.
I like to think I am. I hope I am. I'm glad nobody from my team is here because they would call me out on a few of those things. So if you look at empathy and that mutual respect, then you start to get that trust because people think that you or believe that you are in it for the right reasons and you're along with them for the ride. And it's important to say that if you try and fake empathy, people will see right through that. If you try and just kind of phone it in, they'll know straight away that you're not genuine.
Anybody else? Oh, you've got one here as well, yeah?
If people start telling you lies, if you wonder why they're not delivering when they said they were going to deliver, then they don't feel that they can trust you. And that goes to the trust conversation. So if they don't feel that they can turn around and say, look, we're going to be delayed, and you know as early as possible. A lot of organizations do 360 feedback, so it's blind feedback, which is really, really useful to get that from your team as well. You get this anonymous feedback saying either you're awesome or you're rubbish. Oh, that's a good question. So in terms of software development, Agile, if you do Agile properly, and I'm looking at Katie here, who used to be an Agile leadership, used to run Agile Sheffield. Sorry, Katie. Who is available for hire. But I've done a lot of work with her in the past. So if you do Agile properly and you have the team involved in that, so you're not just following Scrum, the book of Scrum, you're actually doing Agile in terms of retrospective, how do we improve our processes, how do we improve our communication? That really does help because you can have that open and frank conversation in the room.
There's a school of thought that says the power is bestowed on you by the position you occupy, and let me reframe it. That the respect you get from the team is 20% of the position you occupy and 80% of your knowledge. So from your own perspective, what's your own experience in that?
Sorry, what was the last bit of that question?
I said from your own perspective, so what is your experience in that area? Is it 80-20 also?
Okay, it's actually quite hard to say. So I would say that in software development, people are a lot more cynical. So if you're put in a position of leadership, they kind of go, oh yeah, here comes the pointy-haired boss to tell me what to do again. I'll go. So it is. I'd say it's actually harder to get that respect because you need to prove that you actually know what you're doing and what you're talking about. Maybe in other industries that's different.
And I think we've got we've got quite a few more actually.
And using that kind of like parenting.
All the time. Maybe this is recorded, isn't it? You need to be careful. So I have had people on my team in the past who have had a lot going on at home. Parents, you know, as people get older, their parents get older and things move on. And they need that support and they need to know that you've got their back and having that empathy and bringing that in from kind of going to their level and trying to figure out what's going on, because I've never gone through that. I'm trying to understand and get to their level on where they are and how long it's going to take for them to get past us. Sorry? Yeah, give them more time, more space. A lot of the time, communicate differently. So maybe drop some one-to-ones, or in some cases have it more frequently. Don't pester them on Slack all the time, that kind of thing. So just let people have their own time and let them guide the communication with you, really. A bit more. Well,
I think we've got a few more. Hands up if we've got a few. We'll do like 1, 2 final questions. Yeah, 3 maybe. Yeah. Do you want to go first? Or...
Yes. So one of the companies, I had a software team in India who kept calling me sir, and that's really difficult because you're not expecting it, and you want to build a different relationship with them, and a lot of cultures do look to you, like you were saying, you know, you're the leader now, so we'll do what you want us to do, and it doesn't matter whether that's the right thing. And if you come into a company, you don't know what, you know, it's like, okay, let's go and do that. That's what I've done the last company, and it all falls apart. So you do need to try and Again, it's about understanding what is their culture, where are they coming from, and how can I use that to figure out how I'm going to make this work for the company and for us, and get what we want out of it. Because it has to be two-way. It is a business after all.
I mean, yeah, last two questions will go to this gentleman here as well.
It's easier to lead top with
Question.
Adults are more predictable. I'd say that. Toddlers, yeah, you don't know what you're going to get that day. So I'm talking about emotions that you just don't know. Yeah, so I'd say adults for the most part. If you took an average.
And yeah, we'll go one final question as well.
So yeah, the CEO of Autodesk, Andrew Anagnost, one of the reasons I joined the company, absolutely incredible speaker, really talks about, cares about his staff, cares about everybody that works for him. So you get a lot of questions. So we have a lot of internal, he does every month, he does a podcast of the company and does live on air, answers questions for anybody in the company. You can anonymous message him. And a lot of the questions are, how do you switch off? And he says, well, at 6 o'clock, I turn my phone off, I leave it in the kitchen, and I go spend time with my family. And he's setting that bar for the whole company then. And I think that's incredible.
Excellent. Big round of applause. So obviously another round of applause for Shane as well. I'd like to thank all of our speakers, Neve as well. And Martin, who's making his way in through this side door at the back there as well. Events like this wouldn't be possible. We've got a great marketing team, Oscar, that have kind of done all the hard work. I've done none of it, I will assure you of that. So yeah, big thank you to Lauren and Orla, who really bring this event together. Obviously, a big round of applause for Razor. I think they're around still in their many numbers. I have been told there is still quite a bit left on the bar tab. So you guys are welcome to stick around. Not quite a bit, no, a bit, not quite a bit, sorry. All about the detail. I'd like to thank all of you guys for coming as well. So big round of applause to yourselves. But yeah, thanks for coming. Stick around. We're going to stay for a bit. We're going to get the music on. And yeah, thank you very much.